Thank you, Leo.
Okay, it is now 10 o'clock, so I'm going to go live on YouTube for our public to view.
Morning, everybody. My name.
Oh, Kieran.
Morning, everybody. Hi. Good morning. Sorry, Matt. Between turning the mute on and off at various stages, coming in and out of different events. So, welcome, everybody. My name is Kieran Fahy, and I currently serve as the chairperson of the St. Joseph River Basin Commission. I'm a proxy for James Mueller, Mayor James Mueller of the City of South Bend. And I hope you're all doing well this morning, obviously, considering what we're all going through. I'd like to officially call our meeting to order, it being 10 o'clock, and ask our director, Matt Mearsman, to get us started with some opening business, please.
Thanks a lot, Kieran. Welcome, everybody. It looks like we do have a quorum today, but before I start our roll call, I would just like to provide a brief introduction to the St. Joe River Basin Commission and give some basic instructions for today's meeting. So first of all, my name's Matt Mearsman, and technically I'm an employee of the Michiana Area Council of Governments, or MACOG, but I serve as the director of the St. Joe River Basin Commission as part of a cooperative agreement between the two entities. I've got some of my colleagues here from MACOG that are helping me today, and I appreciate their help as we go through this. So why are we all here today? If you can see the screen, you see that I'm showing a map of all the land that drains to the St. Joe River. This is the St. Joe River Basin or watershed. There are 15 counties between Indiana and Michigan with land in the basin. And the way that these 5,000 square miles of land are used and managed is arguably the largest factor in creating as well as addressing many of our water quality and water quantity issues of concern. So the commission was created by the Indiana General Assembly back in 1988 to address water quality issues in the St. Joe River, as well as all the lakes and streams that flow to it. Our enabling statute does empower us to work with Michigan, talks a lot about it, but our funding and our governance rests solely on the Indiana side of the line. The primary functions, I know there's a lot of text on this slide. You don't need to read it all. I always like to include it when we have our meetings as a reference for how we fulfill our mission. But the primary functions of the commission are to provide a forum for the discussion, study, and evaluation of water resource concerns, as well as fostering cooperative planning and coordinated management of natural resources. So in order to manage these things that don't know political boundaries, we all have to work together. The commission itself is made up of specific individuals from each of our 6 member counties in Indiana, along with a representative for the Indiana DNR. And each of these individuals has the ability to designate a proxy representative to serve in their place. There are currently 32 seats on the River Basin Commission. So when you factor in the proxies for all those folks, the legal counsel, our MACOG staff, and our presenters, we end up with a whole lot of people who are on the meeting today. So before I attempt some form of a roll call, I want to go over some basic instructions for the meeting today. This being our first virtual meeting we've ever attempted, there's a few things that I think are really important. So as I mentioned, it's a big meeting, so it's really important that you remain muted. It seems like everybody's doing a great job of that. If you don't mute yourself, you can and likely will be muted by someone else. You can always unmute yourself. Of course, there are exceptions, and you will need to unmute yourself to cast your vote. Or if you're going to be one of the brave ones that makes a motion, you will need to unmute yourself to do that. But please do remember to remute yourself after casting your vote or making a motion. The slide kind of shows you where the mute button is. If you haven't found it yet, mouse over your screen. You should see it pop up. The chat feature is also going to be important. It's up near the top. You can see the call out there. Hopefully, if you have a screen you're viewing, use the chat feature to record your attendance today. So I'm asking everybody who's here in the way of commission members to please use the chat feature if you can, just to sign your name and basically like a sign-in sheet. So you can also use that chat feature to communicate during the meeting without interrupting. So I have Leah Thill from MACOG who's here with me today. She's going to be serving as the meeting moderator. Not only will she be looking out for folks who may have forgot to mute their phone, but she will also be monitoring the chat feature. So if you have a comment you want to make during the meeting, just please use the chat feature to announce your intention. If you have a question, you don't have to type your full question out if you don't want, but just let us know that you have a question, and Chairman Fahey or myself will make sure to give you the floor. Leah will make sure we know about that. Lastly here, if you're calling on your phone and you have access to a computer or it's a smartphone, you can download the app. Please consider using that to join. You will have a much better experience. So with that, I do want to go over just one last important notes. We always emphasize this in our meetings, but it's more important than ever that you state your name when you're making motions or asking any questions or providing comments. Many folks, or there are some folks joining us just through the phone. And so it will really help us if you can state your name. When we do go for voting on things, you do not need to state your name at that time. Just say aye, that's fine. The chairman, and when we go through votes, the chairman's always going to call for a vote for all in favor as well as all who are opposed. If there are any votes that are not unanimous, a roll call vote will be taken. With that, I think I'm going to jump into some form of a roll call. We do have a quorum. I see some additional members have joined since I got started here, so hopefully you'll get a chance to call them out. I'm actually going to use some slides that we created as part of a project to create a photo directory of memberships. This was requested at our last meeting by John Roberts, and I really appreciate that suggestion because it's been a good project. I do have to give a lot of credit on this to Katie Dominguez, our graphic design and communications manager at MACOG. She did the magic to make it look nice. So first, we're looking at Elkhart County. I mentioned we have 6 counties. Got a lot of folks from each county who are members, and this kind of shows you who their proxies are. So I know from Elkhart County, we've got Dara Deegan here. Did anybody else from Elkhart County join in the meantime who I may have missed? It's all right. If not, you can always record it in the chat feature there.
Hey, Matt. Jim Hess and Phil Barker are on me.
Awesome. Thank you, Phil and Jim. Great to have you guys. So we got the county surveyor as well as Soil and Water Conservation District with us today. So next I want to go to Kosciuszko County, down on the south side of our basin. I know that we have John Roberts here. We have Jewel Weiss. Those are the only 2 that I managed to catch. Is anybody else here from Kosciuszko County that I may have missed? All right. Well, thank you guys for being here. So LaGrange County, right in the heart of the basin on the Indiana side. The whole county drains to the river, but the river doesn't touch it. I know we got some folks here from LaGrange in particular. Diane Cameron was here. Did anybody else join from LaGrange other than Diane since I... Oh, Jared Nicely. I see you, Jared. We got Jared here from LaGrange as well. All right. Super. If not, you can record. If I didn't miss you there, you can always record in the chat. I would appreciate that. Okay, Noble County. I see Anita Hess with her shades on. She is here. As well as her proxy, Dan Lash, is here. I'm guessing between one of them, we'll do the voting. We also have Randy Sexton here on the phone. Is anybody else here from Noble County that I may have missed? All right. All right, where I am. So I'm sitting here in South Bend. We've got a lot of folks here from St. Joe, including our chairman, Mr. Fahey. Adam Bowden is here, and Sarah Longenecker from the Soil and Water Conservation District. Is there anybody else here that I may have missed from St. Joe County? All right. Last but not least, Steuben County, way over on the east side of the basin. I know we've got Janelle and Tara, as well as Chris Thomas from the city of Angola, Alicia from the health department. Is there anybody else from Steuben County I may have missed? All right. You'll notice the green box. DNR is here. Rod Edgel, who I wasn't able to find a photo of you out there on the internet, Rod. For those of you who are wondering, where did he get that photo of me? I scoured the internet and managed to find some fun things along the way. But Rod, you are anonymous to the internet right now, so I don't have a picture of you yet. Hoping you can get me one. All right, with that, Kieran, I am going to turn it back over to you. That's the closest thing I got to a roll call, and I do appreciate you guys sitting through that.
Great, Matt. No, thanks very much. So obviously we have a quorum, and the next item on the list on the agenda that Matt circulated earlier in the week is the approval of the minutes. So the minutes from the last meeting of March the 5th. Actually, I couldn't attend myself. I had the EPA and IDEM in town, so I wasn't able to attend. But Matt's circulated those already, so hopefully, if you had any questions on that, you could have gotten back to Matt hopefully already on that. So, but if you have any questions, or Matt, have you any comments on those minutes or anything from anybody?
Not really, Dara. Just a thank you to Carla Herworth, our office manager, for putting them together for us.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion then to approve these minutes. So we need we need a motion and a second, and to state your name. And Matt, do we need a location as well, or just a name is enough?
No, just a name.
Okay.
Anita Hess, and I so move.
Alicia Vanny, I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion and we have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Okay, so the motion is carried. Thank you all. The first virtual one, I presume, of this in the history of the St. Joseph River Basin Commission. So the next item on the agenda, financials. So 2 items under here: financial report and approval of claims. So I'll pass it back to Matt for this.
Great, thank you, Kieran. So I circulated these via email. There's 3 pages to the financial report. The first is our activities, which is sort of a detailed list of our revenue and expenses. There are a couple notes on there. One worth mentioning, that the COVID pandemic has sort of limited some of our expenses, especially travel. So that, and then some expenses being delayed until fiscal year 21. We are some work with the North Branch Elkhart project will be billed next year rather than this year. So the other thing, which I guess just kind of preview, is that I was not able to include some expenses related to our audit that we took part of in our forecast. So later in the meeting, when I talk about the audit, I will be looking for a budget amendment for the audit. But that's all I have on the activity statement. I'm going to go through all 3 of these, and then if anybody has any questions about any one of them, I will take them at the end. The second one is our balance sheet, basically our statement of assets and liabilities. The key number on this one is our fund balance. That's essentially how much money we have in the bank. It is worth noting that this is the first time that the number on the top side of our fund balance, our cash account, is not the same as the bank statement. And that's very common for most companies and organizations. But for us, it's we have such little activity that very rarely is there a check that hasn't been cleared by the time we do our reporting period. And in this quarter, there was. So I included a bank reconciliation report so you can see the check that was outstanding. Liabilities are basically our cost of doing business with MACOG. And then we have a big receivable from Indiana, which has come in since this reporting period ended. So that's all I've got on the balance sheet. And the last one in your packet was the cash flow statement. I've highlighted, for those of you who can see the computer, I have highlighted the income that we received between 12/31 and 3/31, which is when these statements are from. The state of Indiana, we received our 3rd quarter appropriation from the state, about $26,000. And then we also received about $5,000 from the city of Angola, as well as St. Joe County. Now, I'm really excited to report that since 3/31, so it's not included in your statements, but since 3/31, we have received all remaining local government appropriations for the year. And I believe this is the first time in the history of the St. Joe River Basin Commission that we have financial support from every single member. So thank you all for your work, and I'm excited about that. So that's the last page of the financial report. I will take any questions if there are any. If not, I will turn it back over to Kieran.
Okay. No questions have been made. I don't see them in the chat, and I don't see anybody speaking up. So no questions from myself either. So I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I so move.
I think we had a motion. I think we have a second as well. Who seconded that? Was it?
It looks like this is Dara Deegan here. I'll second, and it looks like Anita Hess made the motion to approve.
Yes.
Perfect. Perfect. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, nay. Motion is carried. Thank you all. Next item, the approval of claims. Back to you, Matt.
Thank you, Kieran. Recirculate not only the claims form, which you can see here on the screen, but each of the invoices that's associated with these claims. Pretty regular. We do have some claims associated with our North Branch project that are pretty good size. I included the invoices for those in your packet. It's worth noting that we got $26,000 of grant income from IU to cover many of these expenses, and we do expect to receive another $13,500 before our fiscal year end to cover a large part of the North Branch project costs from our IU Grand Challenge grant. And then the only other thing I would note is under our symposium, there's an invoice from Waterwords that work. I just want to make sure that folks know that does not include the additional online trainings that we will be offering. So this is just for the services from the symposium. But that's all I have. If there are any questions, I'd take them now.
Matt, I don't hear any questions, and I don't see any questions in the chat room either. So, and I have no questions myself. So I'd also entertain a motion to approve the pool of claims from the floor.
Alicia Vanny, I'll make a motion.
Thanks, Alicia. A second?
Dara Deegan, I'll second.
Thanks, Dara. Having a motion and a second, all in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, nay? Okay, motion carried. Next section, old business. First item here, the virtual, the 20th annual symposium and the first virtual symposium of, again, in the history of the St. Joseph River Basin Commission. So I'll hand it back to you, Matt, for a summary on this. And you did, I think overall it went very well, and we're all very happy with it, based on the circumstances at the time. So well done.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Kieran. As Kieran mentioned, we were forced to go virtual due to the pandemic. I know some of you who were able to tune in were hoping to see me out on the river today. I was able to sort of broadcast from the river for the symposium, but I felt like I had to juggle too many screens today that I couldn't get away with it. We did have close to 100 people who attended the symposium, which was incredible. About half of them were brand new. We did have a stronger representation on the Indiana side of the basin. But I think a lot of the feedback I heard was positive. I will say that I didn't expect to be nearly as excited after completing the symposium, being in a virtual format. It's a big event for me every year, and I always come off all pumped up and almost high from the experience of leading the meeting. And this year, I thought, oh, man, with this virtual thing, it's just not going to feel the same. But man, afterwards, I was like really stoked. Thought, man, this went really good. Until I got an email from the presenter that included a recording of the symposium, and I thought, oh man, I've worked so much this week. I'm going to punch out, drink a beer, and watch this recording. Oh, that was a terrible idea. Not only was I counting my ums, which I just said, but I was like just cringing at me rambling on in the beginning. So thank you for everybody who sat through that, and I'm glad you all enjoyed it. I did too. But anyway, the other thing related to the symposium that I want to report on is that we did have considerable cost savings by moving it online. We didn't have to pay for a venue. We didn't have to feed everybody. We didn't have to fly the speaker here. So we were able to work out a new arrangement with Waterwords that worked to offer 3 in-depth online training series for our members and partners. Hopefully you all received an email about this. We've got them scheduled now. The first one's actually starting next Thursday. These have 3 sessions in each series held once a week from 9 to 10:45 in the morning. There are 3 different topics. I sent out a survey to get input. I mean, this company offers a lot of different options, and they're all really good. So it was hard to choose, but I sent out a survey and got some really good feedback, and we've narrowed down 3. I'll just kind of briefly mention them. There's a ton of information on the internet, but this breaking through the barriers is really about sort of reaching underserved. It covers the basics of communicating with natural resources, but in particular dives into how to reach audiences that might not be used to getting this message. Closing the deal with rural landowners. We heard a lot about this one during the symposium. Folks were really interested in it, in particular reaching out to the Amish community, which makes up a large part of the basin. So this one will be really critical for a lot of our soil and water conservation district folks. And then the last one is social skills for social media, sort of demystifying the Facebook and the Twitter and all those things those youngsters use. But anyway, I'm excited about them. We've got a lot of interest, a lot of folks signed up. I just sent the list to the presenters. We had over 30 people signed up for the first one, so encouraged by that. I'm going to leave it at that for the symposium and ask if anybody has any questions. If not, I guess I will wrap it up by saying it made us think. I've talked to several members, and it made us think about the virtual format. You know, certainly limitations to it, but also some possibilities. And it's something that, you know, whether we do both, try to integrate them, something like that, I can see an opportunity for continuing something like that. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Kieran.
Perfect, Matt. So no questions have come in on that. The special projects update, Matt?
Yes. I've got 3 different projects I'm going to talk about. I'm going to try and just keep it short and sweet. Each one of these is a monster in itself. First thing I'm going to talk about, we talked a lot at our last meeting about additional staffing. We were all lined up. We had interviews scheduled in March, and the pandemic hit before our interviews. So we had to cancel those, and we're currently, you know, I've talked a lot with the MACOG executive director. We're waiting for a return to some more normal office protocols, at least, before we try to think about onboarding somebody. I think that because of the large delay that we've had, it does also open up an opportunity to consider summer internships potentially. We had some interest from some students that, you know, when we were in February, it didn't seem realistic, but now that we're into the summer, you know, working with someone on a part-time basis who might be interested in going further after school is potentially an option. So that's all I've got on our staffing update. It is something we intend to get back into, but right now, many of us at MACOG are still working at home. We do expect to be back in the office in the next couple of weeks on some kind of schedule, but it's going to be a little bit unusual for a little while. Any questions on staffing? If not, Kieran, I'll go ahead and move through each of the projects, and Leo will let us know if someone has a question.
Perfect, thank you, Matt.
The next project I'm going to talk about is our urban tree project. This is funded with a Great Lakes Restoration Initiative grant of about $130,000. We worked with 6 communities in the basin, 3 communities on the north, on the Michigan side of the basin, and 3 communities on the Indiana side. So COVID pandemic got in the way of this one a little bit in the sense that all the analysis was able to be done. I just reviewed the draft story map and the draft report, and it looks really incredible. So they've done a lot of analysis, but as far as tree planting, nothing has occurred. They were hoping to work with at least 2 communities this spring to get trees planted. That has come and gone. So this likely will be getting pushed back. I do think they're still hoping to work with 1 or 2 of the communities this fall to get trees in the ground. But this project was focused on identifying where to plant trees to have the greatest impact on stormwater retention. How can we target our tree planting efforts to get water out of the sewer system, out of our storm drains, and keep it in a living plant? So some good results there. I guess at this point, I would like to, ask for approval from the commission. This might not technically be needed because we do have money budgeted in a line item for partner support, but I want to be really explicit about it. There was the opportunity for communities to get an additional custom assessment, and several of our communities chose to move forward with this. 2 of our members in particular, with the city of Angola and the town of Syracuse. And I didn't bother listing out all the communities. There, you can see them on the slide if you can see the community. But 2 of them are our members, and these folks contribute to the River Basin Commission. And I've been talking to them, and I would like to be able to provide some financial support for the additional assessment. So we have money in our line item for partner support. And I would be looking for, on the low end, about $2,000 out of that roughly $8,000 that's remaining there this fiscal year to assist these communities with their, these 2 communities in particular, with their additional assessments, which were both related to tree canopy health, you know, identifying where weak spots are in the canopy and the health. And I guess I'm going to add one more thing because communication is difficult with this virtual thing. that is on the upper end, we would be looking at $5,400 to offer support to all 6 communities. Now, I don't know that they would all take it, but that would be enough money to cover an additional assessment for each of the 6 communities. But at the very least, I think it would be really important to offer support to the 2 member communities who have contributed. The third one on the Indiana side is the town of Middlebury, which technically isn't a member itself, but of course it's in Elkhart County, and Elkhart County is one of our largest financial supporters. So to me, I wouldn't have any problem spending the whole $5,400 on this project to help these folks, but I would like a formal approval from the commission before moving forward with that. At the very least, I would like to help our members.
So you should take some questions on that item. Anybody have any comments on that, or questions or concerns? You can unmute yourself and you can state your concerns or comments, or you can put it in the chat box and we can discuss it. I'll give you a minute to think about that.
Okay, and I can actually move on to the next one. Oh, go ahead. Yes.
I would be hesitant about trying to limit it to just the 2 that are contributors to the basin. If you're going to offer it, I would recommend that it be for an offer to all 6 that participated. You could get into, bias objections, or if one of the other communities happen to get mad about it.
Okay, thank you, Brandy. That was Brandy Ecker, our legal counsel, advising us if we should move forward on this. She would recommend that we offer the support to all 6 communities, which we do have enough money in that line item to cover it that's not currently allocated to anything else. So, Brandy, thank you. Anybody else want to comment on that now, or questions?
Hey, Matt, this is Dara here. How much was the grant again? I'm sorry, I lost that. But
no problem. $130,000.
Okay. I just, in my mind, I mean, that's a pretty substantial grant for the River Basin Commission. It's leveraging a small amount from the River Basin Commission. I see as $5,400 a small investment and a worthy investment towards this project. So,
thank you, Dara.
Alicia Vanny. So would you be requesting, or would you be talking with all the recipients, the 6 recipients, to ask them if they need money towards this additional assessment, and you're going to give them time to kind of think it over, and if they decline the offer, then you're just going to not use the whatever it may be, their portion of it out of the $5,400? So the cap is $5,400, but it could be under that, correct?
That's correct, Alicia.
So, Matt, what we're talking about here really is to give you the authority, I suppose, to pass a motion to give you the authority to offer up to $6,000 for some flexibility to these additional 6 communities. So, if they wish to accept it and participate along with us, but it's not a given. We're not going to just force this upon them. But if there's a sense that they want to cooperate with us and work in partnership, then you need the flexibility in advance from us. Correct?
That's exactly right, Kieran.
Okay.
And Matt, we also have a comment from Lydia Mertz wanting to see them.
Is Lydia able to talk, Lydia? Or Leah, you got cut off there a little bit. Did you actually have some more information about her comment?
Oh, that she just wanted to see all the communities considered. That was her
good.
comment.
Good. There seems to be some other support for that as well. Kieran,
are there any, just for legal counsel involved here? So all this money has originated, this 5,600 or the 6,000 is all originated via the Indiana side, basically further from Indianapolis or from the member counties and cities. Is there any issue with Indiana finance has been going across the border to pay for projects in Michigan? Is there any either ethical or legal concerns about that?
Given that it's all related to the River Basin's activities, and correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, but this project is one that the River Basin is actively involved in managing, and they are just participating in it?
That's right. We're actually, and we contributed so far in-kind match. You know, I put in time on this, but this would be the first cash match we've contributed, but it would help leverage to get those federal funds to our communities.
I don't see a problem with making the offer, and if they take the offer, taking it. I don't think that would be an issue as far as, you know, giving money to the wrong people as part of your project that you are forwarding and offering the money. So I think that would be fine.
Thanks, Brandy. Okay, so I suppose we should propose, I would entertain a motion to, the right wording would be, I suppose, to allow Matt the flexibility to spend up to $6,000 on support to these 6 communities for the GLRI Urban Tree Project. Is that the right terms, Matt?
That's good enough, Kieran, yes.
Okay. Do I have a motion for that? Somebody to support that?
This is Dara Deegan. I'll make that motion.
Okay, and a second, please.
Jewel Wise, I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, please say nay. Okay, motion approved. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
The next item we have.
Now, one more. I do have one more project update, Kieran.
One more project update. Okay, perfect. Thanks.
And actually, I'm going to keep it real short on this one. The last one is our north branch of the Elkhart River planning project. It's a flood hazard mitigation plan. And we're going to hear a lot about this later in the meeting. We've got a couple presenters that are going to talk about it. So I just want to note that we will be holding a stakeholder meeting at 2:30 this afternoon using the GoToMeeting platform, which will allow more folks, stakeholders, and the public the ability to interact. I mean, in a way that many of you members are able to interact today. So we're going to get into more detailed information with the stakeholders in that area. This is the area with Wolcottville. It's the northern part of Noble County and southern part of LaGrange County, the Indian Chain of Lakes, the West Lakes. That's the area we're talking about. We'll be getting an update on fieldwork, data analysis, and mapping that has been completed. But I would like to, at this point, bring up one business item related to this project. So it's concerning mapping. The original project budget only covered flood resilience maps for the main stem of the North Branch. This does not include what is known as Little Elkhart Creek, or might be called the Middle Branch. This is what comes out of Kendallville and goes through the town of Wolcottville. This is also Sylvan Lake we're talking about. So we not having these flood resilience maps, I think we're at a bit of a loss, and we've discovered a lot more. You're going to hear more about it today. But given the development that's occurring around Kendallville, their financial support in particular, and some of the unique issues that have been discovered, I would like to propose that we use up to $4,000 of our funds budgeted for planning and resource development to purchase additional flood resilience maps that would cover this main stem that includes Wolcottville and the city of Kendallville. Any questions or again, this money is there in our budget for planning and resource development. We'll hear more about it later, but I feel like it would be a good investment of our funds.
Hey, Matt, this is Dan Lash. And even though I'm not voting today, there is more than one tributary that empties into Waldron Lake, and there is a dry creek run, and probably Randy Sexton could comment about that. There's another one that comes from Sackrider Lake. I think it's called Sackrider Ditch. That's another one. So we probably would want to consider that part of the watershed as well, because there's more than just one watershed from Kendallville that empties into our lake. Sylvan Lake's the biggest one, but Sackrider Lake is also another source. So.
Thank you, Dan. I just want to clarify that these maps are primarily related to development. So this is like, where should we build? Where should we not build? And you're right. There are tons of tributaries to the lake, and we can't cover them all. But what we're trying to do is cover the biggest one, or the main one. So the original project included what's called the main stem of the North Branch. But in doing just that, recognizing the Middle Branch has a lot of unique issues, as well as the largest city in the watershed, which is where development largely occurs. This being a development-oriented tool, I think that that's the focus for why this area rather than one of the other tributaries. Does that help, Dan?
Yes, that does.
Okay.
Any other questions on that from anybody? Okay, Matt, to clarify then, what motion do you need to?
Right. What I'm looking for is approval to use up to $4,000 of funds budgeted for planning and resource development to purchase additional flood resilience maps for the Little Elkhart Creek.
Do I have such a motion?
So moved. Randy Sexton.
Randy Sexton, thank you. And a second? Do I have a second?
Dara Deegan, second.
Thanks, everybody. I have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, nay. Okay, motion is carried. The next item, Matt, is that the last of the special projects? Yep. Great. Okay, so new business. The financial year, the 16 to 19 audit that was just completed. You'll give us an update on this, Matt. Thank you.
Yes, so I was notified the day before the symposium that we were going to be getting audited by State Board of Accounts, and they wanted to have their review completed the next week. This was completely news to me, and I've never been through an audit, and it was quite an experience. As the fiscal officer, I spent a ton of time compiling documents, analyzing old financials, completing all kinds of forms, and even tracking down a former St. Joe River Basin officer as part of the review. It was wild. The emails were just flying like crazy with requests from State Board of Accounts. It was definitely a learning experience, and I do think we'll be a lot better off next time. The good news is that there were no findings from the review. The official report has not been published, but there were no findings, so we are in good shape with the state. And I would like to thank the Maycog Accounting Department, as well as the St. Joe River Basin Commission officers for their help during the process. It was great to have someone to lean on. The business item, I don't have anything else I mean, it was intense, but I don't really have anything worth reporting about the process itself. But it does, of course, bring up there's costs. The state charges us for this thing, and because we didn't know about it until the last minute, it was not included in our budget for this year. However, we do have additional money in our basic operating budget under our rent line item because of the delay in expansion at Maycog. So I would like to propose or ask for a budget amendment to increase our audit line item by $2,000, which is about what it's a little over what we expect to get from the state based on their estimate, as well as increasing the accounting services line item by about $500, which should be more than enough to cover the additional time that was spent by Maycog accounting staff working on the audit, and then decrease the office rent line by an equal amount, $2,500. I'd be looking for a motion to do that.
Matt, thanks for all your work on the audit, and having read the audit report, even though they always remained fairly benign in their opinions, and that it did seem to have gone very well. It is funny when you get audited and then you have to pay for the privilege of being audited. So it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of choice in regards to any of that. So basically, I would entertain a motion for the budget amendment request as is presented currently on screen. Do I have a motion?
Alicia Vania will move.
Thank you. And a second?
Dara Deegan, second.
Thank you, folks. I have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, nay. Motion carried. Next item. Thanks, Matt.
Just a bit of an interruption. This is Leah here. I saw we had 2 more people join us, a 260 area code, and we had a 703 area code, but they may have dropped off. Wanted to see if you want to get that for the record, if anyone joined by phone.
Yeah, if you joined by phone, if you could state your name.
We lost the 703 number,
okay.
So yeah.
And if you're muted, you can use *6 to unmute yourself on the phone, just so you know. Thanks, Leah.
It looks like someone unmuted themselves to introduce themselves. Number ending in 31.
Okay, well, if you can, we'll have some time at the end. Oh, there you go, maybe.
I rejoined because I got disconnected, Randy Sexton. That may be me.
Okay, thank you, Randy. If not, we'll leave some time at the end if you stick around with us, but do appreciate making sure we get everybody counted who's here. All right. The next item on our new business, if it's all right, Karen, I think I just, were there any questions, I'm sorry, on the audit, I guess, before I move on from that? If not, okay. The next item on our new business is our work plan. Basically, there are no significant changes from last year. We did include a specific mention of the completion of the North Branch project, but this sort of matches up with our budget that we'll be talking about in a second, and covers all the kinds of things we would do under basic operations, as well as the special projects that we have going on. We do look for approval of this work plan every year, and so I would ask for a motion to approve the work plan or any questions related to the work plan.
Anybody have any questions for Matt for the work plan? And you can use the chat area, or you can just ask, you can unmute yourself and ask directly.
Hey, Matt, Dara Deegan here. Anything substantially different in this year's work plan as opposed to others?
No, just the addition of the North Branch project explicitly, and then I did change the wording to provide some clarification regarding additional staffing possibly being constrained by local government support received. Thanks, Dara.
Anybody else with the questions for Matt or just concerns in general? Okay. Entertain a motion for the financial year 2021 work plan to be approved.
So moved, Randy Sexton.
And a second, please.
Jewel Wise, second.
We have a motion and a second. Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, please say nay. No further questions and no one opposed. Motion carried. Thanks, Matt. Next item, the 2021 budget adoption.
Yeah, so with the budget, I'm going to start by talking about the top half, which is our revenue. This is probably where the biggest story is on our budget, and that is related to basically related to pandemic-related factors with the state. The state is forecasting significant reduction in their revenue, and they have forced all state agencies to several things. Come up with a strategic spending plan that shows how we're going to reduce our costs, as well as they have placed this is the key factor. They've placed a large reserve on our fund. There's always a reserve in place. Basically, we have $105,000 in the general fund budget for the state, but each year they put a certain percentage of that on reserve for contingencies or what kinds of problems might come up. Well, and you don't have access to that percentage. In the past, that's been 2%. They have increased it to 15% this year. So we're only getting 85% of our $105,000 in fiscal year 21. So with that reduction in state revenue, that affects largely at this point, because of our support from local government, that affects our ability to implement special projects. So that will affect the very bottom part of our budget. But you'll notice the change here, and I've explained that in note A. The other thing, which is also related to the pandemic, is our interest revenue is declining rapidly. We had our funds for the last year or so in an account that's special for local governments that has allowed us to earn a significant amount of money on interest. And I have noticed that the last 2 months, it's been zero. There's been essentially no interest earned on our money. So that's related to the market. And I do expect there to be issues continuing with that. So when I tried to estimate our number for our budget next year, I basically averaged our fiscal year 19, where we weren't earning much interest at all, with fiscal year 20 to come up with that number. And then the last one I'll make a note about is special projects, expected revenue from the IU Grand Challenge Grant, as well as an extension of our GLPF project. That's all I've got. Anybody have any questions on the revenue side? You can always ask them at the end. If not, I'm going to go ahead and move into the middle part of our budget, which is the basic operations. This is essentially unchanged from last year, or from this year, I should say. The only thing, I guess, there was a note related to how we calculate the amount for director's salary. Office rent, I've decided to hold it at what we currently have it at, which is more than enough. Historic rate has been about $2,100 per our contract with MACOG. It could go as high as $7,000 with an expansion of office and staff, but at this time that hasn't happened, and with the delay, I think we would be plenty safe at $6,520. So basically, no changes to this section. If there are any questions about that, I can take them now or at the end. The last part of our budget is the special projects, which I mentioned earlier. And except for the drainage project, or what I often refer to as the GLPF project, whose expenses are always offset by grant revenue, all special projects expenses were decreased by at least 15%. And that was to address the directives from the state budget agency. I had to develop this strategic spending plan. And one of the ways that I could support that plan was by saying that the budget that we've proposed has a 15% reduction in these items. And so that's kind of how I address. I didn't do straight 15% because we do have some commitments. So you'll notice the planning and resource development line item does include enough money to cover the funds we've currently committed to the North Branch of the Elkhart project. So, and does leave us with some additional, what you might call unallocated funds. So, of course, worth noting that these items can be changed like we did earlier in the meeting. If new opportunities arise, we can do budget amendments to address things. But I just tried to address the directive from the state budget agency to show a decrease in our expenses to match our decrease in revenue. So that is the last slide I have on sort of explaining each of the revenue and expense changes. Does anybody have any questions about the budget overall? And if not, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Kieran.
Thanks, Matt. I don't see any questions either. I'll just check the chat area to see if anybody has suggested anything. No, I believe the recent comments were already addressed. Okay, so okay. I have no questions myself either. So I'd entertain a motion to approve the 2021 budget, to adopt the 2021 budget. Do I have a motion on the floor? And remember to unmute yourself. Thank you, Ann.
I saw Anita Hess there on the second, I think. I heard Randy Sexton on the
Perfect.
The first and Anita on the second.
Randy Sexton and Anita Hess. Yeah. Great. Okay, thanks, folks. Having a motion and a second, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, nay. Okay, motion carried. Thank you, Matt. Keep moving on.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so this sort of matches our budget. I always ask for approval from the board of our what we call our local government appropriation. This is basically how we divide up the basic operations portion of our budget. I mentioned earlier that having the funding from local governments that covers our basic operations keeps us strong when things change at the state. And based on what I've heard from my predecessors, that happens. This year is not unique in that, dramatic changes from the state. So that basic operations portion of the budget is the key number that we look to our local governments to help us with. And this chart sort of lays out how we divide up those costs. It's in our statute. It's based on land area in the basin. I've incorporated population numbers to help offset or to incorporate the city members, the municipal members, towns and cities. So this is essentially unchanged from last year, because last year we were already planning for a $63,000 basic operations budget. That was a 6% increase from the year before. So I have already started requesting. We're in request season now. People, local communities are working on their budgets for next year, and I've already sent out several of the requests based on that $63,000 number. So this is just to match what we just approved in our budget, and I would take any questions, but it's pretty much the same as last year.
So Matt, like you said, we've pretty much already approved the framework for requesting this because we already approved the budget. So it seems very straightforward to me. So I have no questions anyway. Anybody else have any questions or concerns or queries for Matt? Do you have a motion to approve the 2021 local government appropriation requests?
Barry Deegan, so move.
And a second, please.
Jewel Wise, second.
We have a motion and we have a second. Thank you, folks. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Motion carried. Thank you, folks. Okay, thanks, Matt. Next item, please.
All right. So the sort of last formal item under new business that I have is our fiscal year 21 legal contract. In talking with Brandy and looking through some things, realized that we fell behind a little bit on our legal contract. We've been doing this every 2 years. It's been the same contract for a really long time. This is essentially the same contract we've done every year, but it's retroactive to July of 19 for continuity. And the only other change was an increase in the charges for other legal services, which I can explain in paragraph 4, from $120 to $130 per hour. This is the rate that we have been charged since Brandy has taken over from Mr. Zakis, and that was sort of agreed upon when she took over. I think it's a reduced rate already. A small increase in our charge, and this is not for so Brandy's here representing today, providing counsel during the meeting. This is not for that. Brandy often takes my calls. I don't know if, hopefully no one's from your firm is listening, but takes my calls and gives me some help without charging this rate. But when we do ask her to review contracts, this is the rate at which she would be charging per hour and any other legal services. So I would be requesting a motion to approve the new contract so that we can have our chairman sign and make sure that we have counsel.
Any questions for anybody, for Matt or for Brandy in relation to the 2021 legal contract before we look for a motion? Okay, do I have a motion to approve the 2021 legal contract?
I will move to make a motion. Alicia Vanny.
Second, Randy Sexton.
Thanks, folks. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Perfect. Great stuff. Motion carried. The next item is, other business updates, commission members. I'm not sure we're going to have a lot here, but not to discourage anybody from speaking, but I think if anybody has any items, I know we had earlier opportunity, and then hopefully people knew that they could email Matt as well earlier in the week at any stage. But generally, this is the section where we get updates from the floor. If anybody has any interesting, exciting, or essential kind of news that they'd like to share with the floor at this stage. So, I'm not sure what the best format for this is, Matt. If people need to just put something into the chat box and say if they have something and they'd like to unmute themselves, maybe, and go for it at that stage.
I guess so. It's pretty tricky with this many people on.
It is. Well, we can just take 10 or 15 seconds, and if anybody wants to unmute themselves, go for it.
While we're waiting for, oh, go ahead.
No, I don't think we have any items from the floor then, Matt. Unless there's anything else you want to add yourself.
Nope, that's it. Sorry.
Perfect. Okay, so director's report.
Yes, and I will try to keep this brief too. It has been, this is the time in the meetings where I talk about things that we might not have covered otherwise. So administratively, I've been doing a ton. We did touch on the photo directory and of course the audit, which was a ton of administrative stuff, but also working with State Board of Accounts on that strategic spending plan, and then usual sort of board management. We had some new members and proxies, that kind of stuff. Education and outreach, produced a couple articles, one on the Symposium, one on the tree project, which get distributed through MACOG. I've also been working with some college students. One student from University of Notre Dame, Matt Mulatto, he's working on his sustainability capstone project, and we've been partnering together. He's doing research on drainage laws and investigating incentives for stabilizing hydrology, which as many of you who know me know, that's right up my alley. And so, you know, I got Matt looking into drain code on the Indiana and Michigan side of the line, and excited about what we might do there. Also provided some assistance to some Andrews University students on some water quality projects they were working on. And then a little bit of advocacy work, just communications with some of our surveyors, as well as Senator Glick and Abbott regarding Senate Enrolled Act. This is on the Indiana side, Senate Enrolled Act 229, which was related to permitting for certain state wetlands and drainage work. Had a lot of communication there. And then lastly, a lot of partner support provided over this period. In particular, I got some good news. We gave support, a formal support letter with some in-kind match on a Great Lakes Restoration Initiative project to inventory the main stem of the St. Joe River. That grant, I found out in April, was awarded to the St. Joseph County, Michigan Conservation District. So they got a grant to do an inventory of the entire main stem of the St. Joe for invasive species. Also hosted a Judy Creek Task Force meeting, which was my first foray into hosting a virtual meeting. And hopefully I learned something from it to make today go better. Also been exploring some grant opportunities with Indiana University's Environmental Resilience Institute. There's a large civic grant, maybe some of you have heard about. Got a call tomorrow with the director down there and some folks from IU about a project, just super idea stage at this point, but taking some of the technology that has been piloted here in South Bend, Kieran, with smart sewers, and just kind of talking about the idea of whether we couldn't do some kind of similar thing out in our rural landscapes with drainage water storage and heavily monitoring a drainage system. So who knows? It's a National Science Foundation grant, pretty big dollars, and we would need some big partners on it. But working on that. And then lastly, I'll just mention providing some member support on some issues down in Kosciuszko, Lake Wawasee, some dredging mishap, as well as a zoning change in Noble County related to a CAFO, a bunch of lake folks, mostly in LaGrange County, concerned about. And then some flood resilience grant opportunities, one with the city of Goshen and then another with Elkhart County. So that's my opportunity to provide some information about what I've been up to outside of what we reported on earlier in the meeting. Any questions on that? Haven't attended any meetings. I haven't done any presentations other than the Symposium. That's what I'm often out there at your drainage board meetings and stuff, and I've been absent. I'm looking forward to getting back.
Great work. Thanks, Matt. Anybody have any questions for Matt and his director's report? Okay. And Matt, you don't need any kind of approval on this. It's just for information purposes.
I do not.
Perfect. Perfect. We've got our presentation next, Matt. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I am going to ask, I believe Bob Barr goes first, and I know that he was having some issues early on in the meeting. But hopefully we've got it figured out so he can share his screen. If not, I know Siavash was able to share his. So Bob Barr and Siavash are both part of the project team. I have stopped sharing my screen. If whoever's going first would like to try to present their screen to the group, this is time.
We are going to do our best.
All right, Bob, it's yours.
All right. What can you see?
It's looking good so far.
Got it?
Got it.
All right. Well, good afternoon or good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here and give you some preliminary results from our North Branch Elkhart Corridor Flood Risk Management Plan. I am Bob Barr, as Matt mentioned. I work with Siavash Beck on a number of different things, and I wanted to tell you just a little bit about what we're doing and why we're doing it. and our approach. I am a hydrologist and a fluvial geomorphologist, which means I'm a river scientist. And I work very closely with Siavash, who is principal engineer and a vice president at Christopher Burke Engineering, on what we think of is large-scale, holistic assessments of river systems. It's something I think we've pioneered in Indiana. We've done a number of them. We've worked extensively in the Kankakee. We've worked in the Maumee River Basin. A lot of this work builds on long-term relationships that Siavash and Christopher Burke have developed with the different basin commissions in Indiana over the years. That background gives us a footing to come in and work on systems where you have a complex interplay between natural systems and built environments, like you have in the St. Joe system. So we had been talking for some time about getting involved up in the St. Joe area. We were interested in that river system. It is a fascinating one on the Indiana and Michigan sides. And we had an opportunity to come together and develop this partnership to look at one of the principal tributaries in Indiana, the North Branch. So what we're going to do today is to kind of walk through a little bit of what we've been seeing, what we've been looking at, and try to show you why we think our approach is a little bit different. We'll talk a little bit about the watershed and the geology of the system. We'll look at the site assessment itself, look at some of the analyses we've done, consider a summary of our findings, and then next steps, and take whatever questions you might have. So we start off, and I'm going to say we a lot in this, because it's not only Siavash and I, but it's our partners as well. And when we work with you, we hope we are seen as partners in your watershed. And we often take this broad view of looking at the watershed, and it helps sometimes to show you a little bit of why we approach it in this way. And so what you're looking at now is a stream functions pyramid, and you can see, hopefully, at the bottom of this slide, that this functional pyramid sits on two pillars, geology and climate. The assumption is that these are fixed in the long-term scale. As we know, the one on your right-hand side, climate, is shifting. So by necessity, this pyramid is shifting and adjusting with that climatic change. When we take this view, we look broadly at the hydrology in the system, how watershed is moving through the watershed into the channels. We consider the hydraulics, looking at how the water is moving in the channel itself. And then we often integrate this into the geomorphology, which is the transport of wood and sediment, but it's what gives you the stream that you see, the organization of pools and riffles and the position of large wood. And what we have found, and the reason this pyramid was developed, is that if these three bottom rungs are in place, the hydrology, the hydraulics, and the geomorphology, then it's much easier to attain the physicochemical and biological functions we want in those streams as well. So with that in mind, we start looking at your watershed and trying to think about how it works, how it moves. And to do this, as you see in front of you, consider the whole watershed. And we tend to start in the headwaters and then work our way downstream to see what kind of changes we can see as we get through it. Now, I will have to tell you that a lake chain is a very unique system to work in. While we're working on the North Branch Elkhart River, we're also working on over 25, almost 30 small lakes that are actually run-of-the-river lakes. They're wide spots in the river that fluctuate with time and with precipitation. And to kind of show you that, I've got in front of you a slide that shows a zoom in looking at what we call parent materials, so the superficial landscape, so what that lake and river is flowing through. And what you can see here, hopefully, is you see the blue of the lakes, but then surrounding it, and remember or understand, please, that we're not only looking at parent materials in geologic materials, we're also looking at topography in this. So you see the blue, and then right above the blue, surrounding it, you'll see the gray. If you look at the legend, you'll see that the gray is organic materials. And those organic materials represent places where that lake has been before. So if you look at Eagle Island, for example, and look out from the lake there, you'll see that this lake at one time spread out and had fingers moving all across this landscape. Some lakes, like Martin Lake and the farther upstream portion of this system, are just fragments of what they were at one time. But as climate changes and more precipitation comes in, these lakes can be expected to swell. They can be expected to move. They can be expected to shift, because this is a lake chain dominated by a river, not lakes in the traditional sense that we often think of them in. And this is fundamental to understanding your system. So broadly, and try to simplify this, we've highlighted the North Branch Elkhart River across the top of this map. And this is our major point of focus. And you can see we're going to come here from the confluence with South Branch, come up through the Waldron system, up to this, through the Indian Lakes, the Music Lakes, and down through here, all the way out. And really, with the tributary ditches coming out over into DeKalb as well. And we're going to start out there and then work our way downstream. And then when we finish with that, we're going to take a quick look at Middle Branch, which is going to come through here into Sylvan and then out over through Kendall and out towards Bixler Lake. Got an arm of a tributary that heads up in this way as well. And we want to think a little bit about what those systems are doing. Kind of re-emphasize the point of these lakes being variable. I've put up a screen capture from King's 1852 map of the area. And if you look at it here, here's Rome City. You can see here, you can see the lakes gathered around this area. Notice that many of the lakes don't have dark lines around them. And they don't have dark lines around them like some of the lakes do, because that area is indistinct. In other words, just like you saw on the first map of parent material, these lakes can expand and contract with time and with precipitation. The overall structure of a lake chain is such that as you start in the headwaters, and particularly in yours, it's fairly steep. You come down a steep gradient, which is unusual in Northeast Indiana. And as you come down through, when you hit flat spots, and so here's the outlet of Nauvoo, but here's a flat spot. So you start seeing lakes develop. As they fall out of the first lake system, they drop down into the Music Lake system. Look at this big flat system. And they fall out the outlet there, down into the Waldron Lake chain, another big flat spot. Come out of Waldron Lake chain and drop off rapidly as they go down to South Branch. So this is going to help shape and form this environment. Think of a series of buckets with a river coming down through it. And you can see my hands move around a little bit here potentially as I'm doing this. Siavash and I are much used to standing in front of you doing this. This is a little bit harder for us. Now, when we look at the river, we'll often start off by looking at this active channel portion here and the floodplain, because we want to see what kind of attachment we have in these systems and how they're connected. We also look at it in plan form. Where are their pools? Where are their riffles? Where is it meandering and where is it not? Because if it's not meandering, it's going to have difficulty moving its sediment. It's going to have difficulty actually functioning as it should, because this meander portion is an integral part of how a river moves material. So with that background in mind, we want to take just a few quick looks at what your system looks like. This is all the way out at the far end of the headwaters. This is Hutchins Ditch out by Ool, which are going to come together and form Little Elkhart Creek ultimately. But you can see here, hopefully, a stream, ditch, moving, flowing. We're looking downstream and you can see the flow, but you can see this well-attached corridor. So that as water comes up in this channel, it's not confined, it can move out, it can flood out into here. There's roughness features out here to slow the water down, attenuate nutrients. This is exactly what we want to see in a stream system. Headwaters like this, I have to tell you, are very rare. These are some of the best I have seen in the state. As we come downstream, Little Elkhart Creek, looking upstream here, we're seeing it flow towards you. Once again, well-connected, good riparian community, enormous wetland over in this zone. What that means is with more precipitation, if this stream starts to flood, it floods into the surrounding floodplain like it should, into the wetland areas. Once again, it attenuates sediment, it attenuates nutrient, starts sequestering those materials upstream instead of letting them go downstream. North Branch, Elkhart, as we get further downstream, this is downstream from Cosperville, all the way downstream. So from the headwaters now, all the way downstream, well-connected floodplains, large adjacent wetlands, everything you could want in terms of overall stream health, and something that we rarely see. With that in mind, we being curious, had to take a quick look at the Sylvan Lake component, or the Middle Branch component. And we were surprised to find that as we went out into the headwaters of this system down here towards Kendallville, it didn't look like we found in North Branch. Deep trapezoidal channels, direct inputs of stormwater, no buffering. During a big event, all the flow is constrained inside this channel, so it tends to tear it up, extensive erosion, and conditions that are unlike anything we saw in North Branch. Downstream and Henderson Lake Ditch, the headwaters of Middle Branch, stream is highly modified. There's some room to spill out here, but it has been straightened and shifted to move it through a large area of sand and gravel. Lots of disturbance, but on the bright side, lots of opportunity for improvement. Downstream, just before we start moving into Sylvan Lakes, the stream, the river is becoming more natural, but along the sides, I want you to see this. This is entrenchment. This is down cutting, something that we saw nowhere in North Branch. And it's the river's response to increasing discharge. So more water, quicker than before, which fits with the development that we saw up around Kendallville, but is still something that you want to be careful of in the long term. Downstream from Sylvan Lake, Sylvan has buffered, and we'll talk about that in just a second. Sylvan has buffered a lot of the water pulses. We have connected floodplains, and it starts to look a lot more like a North Branch type river. So if we think quickly, and I say quickly because we're trying to be conscious of your time here and just give you a quick overview. If we think about it, North Branch is a classic lake chain. It is functioning fairly well. Headwaters are stable, nice riparian corridor. Little Elkhart Creek in Wolcottville actually is a reference stream that we use for the Indiana Fluvial Hazard Mitigation Program to show us just how good a northern stream could be. The lakes serve as traps for sediment, large wood, and nutrients, reducing downstream effects. So when you put this many small lakes up and down a river system, those become sediment traps, much like we would engineer in a stormwater system to hold nutrient, sediment, and large wood. It improves the overall quality of the entire river system, but leads to some management questions with the lakes themselves. Remember that these are run-of-the-river lakes. These are different from what we think about as a separate lake. Large, well-connected floodplains, something, again, we rarely see. No significant change to channel bed and banks, with the exception of some starting adjustment in Middle Branch. Remarkably stable. Take a lot of care with this system. This is an intricately balanced river system that's very sensitive to disturbance, and you need to be cognizant of that. And we'll talk more about that in our report to you in our final presentations. Middle Branch is different. Headwaters are degraded, significant erosion. Headwaters downstream modified extensively, as we discussed. Sylvan Lakes functions as a really big buffer between upstream land use and disturbance and what's occurring down at West Lakes. So West Lakes is sending a big thank you to their friends at Sylvan for taking care of most of the upstream disturbance. With that, I want to turn this over to my colleague Siavash to tell you a little bit about how we try to put this together in a whole system. Siavash, you ready?
Yes, Bob, if you can stop sharing your screen.
I did.
All right, wonderful. So I try to do that. See if I am successful as you were.
Of course you will be. Look at you, right up.
Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning. As Bob indicated, we are a little bit of a handicap because Bob and I are movers. We just move around and shake our hands or whatever, but this is a different forum, so we'll try to do our best. Many of you may have seen this picture. You heard that the precipitation is increasing throughout the Midwest, particularly in Indiana. You can see the recent numbers from the Purdue Climate Resources that show kind of increases in average annual precipitation. You're on the lucky side in the top middle. 5.3 inches is a little less than what others are experiencing, but nevertheless, you are seeing higher precipitation when we look at the last century as we go on. Closer to home, this is the rainfall data we have for Noble County, Indiana, and you can see that also we are seeing that increase, in particularly if you look at from 60s, mid-60s to now, we are seeing a significant change in average annual rainfalls. Of more importance for us is the number of extreme events that we have seen. Now, all of us have witnessed that. It's funny that Bob and I, when we present in different watersheds and different groups, you see a lot of shaking heads when we talk to this thing, because you are actually observing this. You are seeing this increases in the rainfall. So these are a number of events extreme events you're seeing. You can see a significant change as we come forward. Now, look at this last 10, 20 years, and you definitely see lots and lots of increase in number of rainfalls. And I have to ask you and think about this, that, I wish I was there to see your hands as raised up. How many of you do you think this trend is going to reverse or go this way? It's really hard to imagine that, because nothing shows us any different thing going to happen in the future. In fact, the projections from various entities, including the Notre Dame University and some other climate scientists, is that this trend is not only going to increase, but also perhaps is going to increase in a different direction, in much higher rate. So this is obviously a concern for us, because what we are going to do with the watersheds, or what we expect, we have to factor in the changes in the rainfall. The changes in the rainfall have showed themselves somewhat into peak discharges. This is the peak discharge at Cosperville. Cosperville is the only major gauge in the stream. It's downstream of West Lakes, basically near the outlet, and so it captures the flow which goes through the lake system and come out. And you can see that we also are seeing this increases in discharge that is leaving the lakes, basically commensurate with the change in precipitation. One thing that surprised us is the change in the daily flow volumes. Typically, the daily flow volumes track very closely with the rainfall, and as we see more of those, in fact, in some other watersheds, we have seen this flow volumes increasing, not only at the same rate as rainfall, but much higher. And that has something to do with management and how how the land is managed in Kankakee, for example. We saw that so many ditching and so many tiling and going on that and loss of storage, that basically this volume of flow is increasing tremendously. Anyway, what we saw here in the North Branch is that surprisingly the volumes are not increasing as much. This is somewhat we see as a good sign. Still increasing somewhat, but it's not necessarily going all the way up, and that is reflective of the uniqueness of this basin, which we'll talk a little bit more about. You can see some of the reasons for that dampness, if you will, of the dampened effect of that volumes in this picture. Here we have the land use of the North Branch Elkhart River. Note that the percent urban areas is very little. This is same generally or a good surrogate for impervious areas. So you can see the impervious areas are not huge. And every time you see this kind of ratio, it's a hopeful sign that the system is acting naturally. A lot of waters, wetlands, and grasslands and forest area, and natural, and of course, ag areas, which are kept more or less in the general shape they were. So what we are seeing here is a system that is not, although it's modified somewhat, but it's not greatly degraded, and so it can absorb this increased rainfall in a very nice way in terms of stability, in terms of being able to capture those. We also wanted to show you what's happening with the lake levels. The Waldron Lake is the longest, have the longest record. So we show that record that we have. This is important because what we are interested in is looking at this basically last 20 or so years, and you can see a significant change in the number of days that we are above the what we call legal lake level. Many of you are already familiar with that term. Legal lake level is a state of Indiana basically determined through the courts a lake level which we're trying to not be any lower than. So the structures are built in such a way that the minimum lake level is that legal lake level. Kind of you can say, well, normally that's what you expect to have, but you can see the number of times that this normal lake level has been exceeded. In 2019, in particular, you can see about 280 or so number of days, essentially entire year, that you were above this normal, and you find, this is the same year, by the way. If many of you remember that, crops could not be, many farmers had issues with either putting the crops in or taking them out because entire year was wet and back-to-back rainfalls. And so when you have that situation, of course, the lakes is going to show that. Now, at the bottom of this graph, you see that same graph I showed you about the number of days of rainfall, and we think this is pretty much tracks with that. Now, we don't have the 2019 data in this lower graph, but you can see that particularly those high lake levels track very well with number of days we have had. Incidentally, I just want to point out that I need to verify this, but I think most of the houses that were built in the North Branch Elkhart or around these lakes probably were put in this time frame, in 60s and 70s, and so that's where the lake levels were basically low, and so now they're being surprised by these higher lake levels, and of course, as I said, this has direct relationship with the rainfall. Although this particular system absorbs a lot of those changes, still you're going to see that because these are, as Bob pointed out, run-of-the-river lakes, and so they just show themselves. We want to give you a synopsis or the extent of flood hazard area. It's the second issue basically that we have heard, and either from Silver Jacket's report or the stakeholders. Two issues. The first one was the lake levels are high, and second one being that the flooding situation. So this picture shows you throughout the basin. The blue areas are 1% chance floodplains, known as 100-year floodplains. the there, I don't know if you see some of the green are the 0.2%, which are 500-year floodplains, and the areas shown in orange are places where development has occurred within the floodplain. Floodplain, particularly in the run of the river around the lakes, is going to be occupied by flow. That's just what the definition of floodplain is. So the development in those areas obviously are not compatible the system, so therefore you can expect problems as you go in. So there are a couple of areas of one of the areas I want to show you of the highlights. This is, I believe, Indian Lake system. A little bit close up, you can see the tremendous amount of floodplain around these lakes, storage areas, which, as Bob pointed out, they could be occupied as lake levels go up. Of course, still there's available storage in these areas, and we hope to be intact. But there is, of course, development occurred in these areas, which as I indicated, may have been earlier on. But now these developments are experiencing flooding, and unfortunately, I have to say that it's going to continue because there's nothing there that indicates to us that this flow is going to be less in the future. So just to summarize our findings, Bob pointed out that result, from the site assessment, that North Branch Elkhart River main system is remarkably stable and well connected. We are very concerned about, although it's a real resilient system right now, it could be, if we disturb it, we will have very negative results. We will talk about this a little bit more this afternoon, and also as we go further in our report. Headwaters in and around Kennelville are unfortunately degraded with significant erosion, and some of that has to do with those direct stormwater inflow, and some of the channel shape, or no matter what, is development impacts, and not much functional floodplains. Downstream of Kendallville, we have modified extensive sand and gravel extraction, and so which the area that Bob showed in the slide, but we have opportunities, and we'll explore those opportunities as we go forward. Sylvan Lake acts as a buffer between the upstream and land use and the disturbance in the, downstream, and so lucky for West Lakes to have the Sylvan Lake buffering everything upstream of it going on. We talked about average annual rainfall that has been increasing and expected to further increase. The number of extreme rainfall events has been increasing, and as I indicated, we expect them to further increase. The average flow volumes downstream of the lakes are not yet increasing significantly. However, and this could be a result of this extensive storage that we have there and the ability to basin to absorb the rainfalls. We'll see if that would continue in the future. Stability and resilience of the system is attributed to the presence of relatively large amount of flood storage in wetlands and lake and watershed. And as we go forward, the role of the storage in the wetlands is significant and important to our story. There are home built in the floodplains. They continue to be susceptible to flooding and will experience more frequent higher lake levels, I'm afraid to say. And this is the direct result of the climate change we've seen. So that calls for some adaptation, perhaps, and those discussions we had about resilience that we need to be pursuing. West Lake's outlet efficiency, there's been discussion about the efficiency of the in particular case of West Lakes, and maybe due to aquatic growth. We looked at that one, and we're going to discuss it a little bit more this afternoon. We see that impact. We were detecting that impact through our data analysis. However, we also want to put it in context that during the storm events, there's not much impact of this on the flooding. There is some impacts in the low lake levels, which we'll discuss. Developed lake before, and one of the things we saw is that this back-to-back storms, when the lake is high already, you're going to see this prolonged high water in there. So it's just a matter of how frequent these rainfalls are and how close by. And so if you have close to close, back-to-back rainfalls, you're going to see this higher rainfall. Again, it's a direct and natural function of a lake chain with the lakes which are run on the river. Lastly, the preserving the existing wetlands, lake storage capacity is utmost importance to keep the system relatively healthy, thus those resilience strategies. So just to let you know what we're going to do next couple of months as we're going to wrap this project up, is that we're going to incorporate and address any additional input we get from you and other stakeholders today. We're going to conduct some additional analysis. So we are almost done, but we have several more to do. And then we're going to develop this resilience mapping and strategies that I talked about and Matt talked about. And these, right now we have, you can see those tiles. These is going to be like 11 by 17 maps. Right now we have them laid out all around the basically main branch as we very appreciative of Matt and the board to allow us to develop the same type of maps along various tributaries to system, because we are seeing the same thing. Probably is more even important to show those resilience strategies. These strategies basically talk about where are the critical points that storage needs to be preserved, what type of and what we have done is that breaking the system into different geographical areas, and we have specific strategies for each geographical area. What do you do within the river and corridor, just next to the channel? What we suggest to do when you are a little bit straight upside in the floodplain? What do we expect to do if those areas that floodplain is already being developed? So that would be hopefully in our next presentation as we develop these ideas. Here we wanted just to share with you what we have so far. Other steps, of course, after that would develop any recommendations. We'll develop a draft report and distribute it for review. We'll incorporate review comments and issue a final report. And finally, we'll have a final presentation as a larger public forum. Hopefully by then we can be face to face. We expect all these things to be done by your next meeting in September. I assume that you guys will see what the situation is in terms of the final presentation. With that, I appreciate your attention. Thank you for your time that you give us today. If you have time to join us this afternoon, we will be a little bit more details and a little bit more discussions. But with that, I just turn it over to you, Matt. Thank you.
Thank you, Siavash. We'll let some folks unmute themselves and ask some questions. I just want to offer one thing that your presentation caught. I realized I misspoke when I was talking about the maps earlier. I mentioned Little Elkhart Creek as the middle branch, and Little Elkhart Creek is part of the main stem. That's what comes into the Indian Lakes. It's what's coming out of, I described it correctly in the sense of it's what's coming out of Kendallville and going through Sylvan Lake, but that's not Little Elkhart Creek. Everybody in LaGrange County was cringing as I was saying that, I'm sure. So Little Elkhart Creek is currently part of it. The middle branch will now be added to what is being mapped.
Yes.
So as Siavash mentioned, this afternoon, there's going to be another opportunity to talk about this project. They're going to go into things in a little bit more detail, but more importantly, there's going to be a better opportunity for the local stakeholders to comment on this. So Dan, I expect you will be there, maybe Anita too. Randy Sexton, I would expect maybe too. So, but if there's anything that's particularly relevant to the whole commission regarding the project, now is a good time to bring those issues up. And you can email me directly if you somehow didn't know, if you didn't know about the meeting this afternoon, you want to be added, I think we can still get you in there. So send me a note and we'll get you a registration link.
And I would say if you have a question and you don't want to bring it up to the group, put it in the chat and we'll get back to you.
I have a question. This is Dan Lash. I know one of the things that the River Basin Commission is tasked with is mitigating our flooding. I haven't really heard a solution to our flooding here. Would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, I can, hopefully I'll unmute. Yes, I can address that a little bit. You will see that a little bit later on. We have basically found that there is flooding in there, but as I pointed out, those flooding is happening within the floodplain. We don't have any flooding right now happening outside the floodplain. And so when flooding happens in the floodplain, it's kind of a, it would be the solutions to not let water to to flood its own floodplain becomes limited. We had this discussion a little bit with the other basin commissions, like the Kankakee River, as an example. There was expectation by the farmers that they should be able to farm in the floodplain. And again, that's not what the floodplain does. It's very difficult. In order to reduce those floodplains, if we are asking that, okay, can we modify these floodplains to make them smaller, then you need to have maybe additional storage or somehow reduce the coming flow. And that's something we're going to explore as part of a potential solution. But more importantly, I want to say what we have seen around the state is that the flooding is going to occur. It's going to get more. Maybe instead of looking for solution to reduce the flooding, is how do we live with it? How do we adapt to it? How do we be ready for it in the case? So that may be a preview of what we may be discussing. We are not giving up of looking for solutions per se to reduce the flooding, as you pointed out. But I would just note that flooding in the floodplain is a natural thing. But again, if we want to do something to reduce it, we have to change the floodplain. Those resiliency maps, by the way, are going to highlight how do we keep things from getting definitely worse, and also how we deal with the flooding there, for sure.
That's appreciate your response, and I know it's tough, Dan, and things with mitigation is really what we're tasked with, and we don't want to make things worse. We want to reduce harm and hazards, and that's our first priority. So figuring out how we do that. Does anybody else have any questions? Or Bob, you want to add anything?
No, Dan's question is a difficult one. It's one that Siavash and I have had ask of us a number of times, and there's not a happy answer. You're particularly when the floodplain is what's being inundated. If you want to reduce the impact in that position, you're going to simply move the flooding somewhere else. So someone else gets it.
All right. Well, I thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation. Again, as they mentioned, if you include any additional questions, we can follow up with you, or you are welcome to attend our meeting this afternoon. Kieran, I can turn it back over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. And thanks for the presentation, Siavash and Bob.
Thank you, Kieran.
So the next, we're almost getting to an end here, but we've got the presentation completed, items from the floor. So not just for commission members, but anybody else. I don't know if we've anybody else other than commission members online at this stage. We've got 26 members, but I think, Matt, at the stage you open the floor to anybody that wanted to make a comment or raise a concern or anything like that.
Thanks, Kieran. Basically, what I was thinking with this item in our meetings, typically we would do just that. We would open it up to the folks who are in attendance. But today on the meeting, it's pretty much limited to members and some presenters. So I invited folks from the public through the agenda, as well as my large outreach list, to submit their comments or questions via email. When I last checked before I got on this meeting this morning, I had not received any. So great. I think we can move through that one. And
well, I think we're there then, Matt, are we? I think we've covered everything on the agenda. Unless you have anything you want to raise yourself before we close.
I don't. I guess I just want to thank everybody for putting up with another web meeting, if you've been doing a lot of them already, or for being adventurous enough to try your first one. I know that we had some other folks who haven't done too many of these, and it's a little intimidating. And thank you. And for those of us joining us by phone, making us meet our quorum, that was essential. I was a little nervous for a second, but got a great turnout in the end. So, Chairman, thank you for leading the meeting.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks a lot. And postponing this wasn't really an option because of the legislation which created the River Basin Commission. So thanks to Matt for doing the absolute best to keep it moving along. Just to mention that the next meeting hopefully will be in person. And it'll be in our usual location, Matt, correct, in Elkhart?
That's correct.
September the 3rd, 2020, obviously. So that's 3 months' time. Okay, so with that, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting. Anybody want to adjourn the meeting? Thank you.
So moved, Randy Sexton.
Second?
Dara Deegan, second.
A motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
I'm presuming There's no need to say this, but anybody opposed to not ending the meeting? Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Thanks, Matt, in particular. Thanks, guys.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, folks. We're done. Thanks.